Did you know that as recently as 1938, an airplane discovered an entire civilization of 200,000 people that the rest of the world didn't know existed? Not a lost tribe of a few dozen. A whole valley, roughly 80 kilometers long, farmed field by field, drained by hand-dug ditches, fed by generations of people who had never seen metal, never seen the wheel, and had no idea there was an outside world at all. They were living, essentially, in the Stone Age, in the same year Superman first appeared in comic books. And they had been there, hidden behind a wall of mountains no outsider had ever crossed, for thousands of years. This is the Balium Valley, in the highlands of West Papua, often called the last Stone Age valley on Earth. Today we're going deep inside it to see exactly how people live there, how they farm, how they fight, how they grieve, and why some of them still keep the smoked bodies of their ancestors sitting by the fire. For most of us, this is the closest we will ever get. There is a chief in this valley who still sleeps beside the blackened, mummified body of an ancestor who died roughly 250 years ago. For generations, the women here answered grief by cutting off their own fingers, one joint at a time, every single time someone they loved died. And far to the south, in a lowland jungle so remote it was one of the last places on the planet to meet the modern world, live a people who build their homes up in the tops of the trees, sometimes 100 feet off the ground. And until shockingly recently, those same people were accused of doing something the rest of the world was certain had died out centuries ago. But to understand any of it, you have to go back to the exact moment the outside world first looked down and realized this place was even there. It's June 1938, and a flying boat is crossing a mountain range no European had ever managed to cross on foot. The man in that aircraft was an American named Richard Archbold, a naturalist and explorer funded by the American Museum of Natural History. He was flying a huge twin-engine flying boat nicknamed the Goober, mapping the interior of what was then Dutch New Guinea, one of the last genuinely blank spaces left on the world map. On the 21st of June, 1938, Archbold's plane crossed the Central Highlands, and the crew looked down at something that didn't make sense. Below them was a broad, green valley, high in the mountains, around 1,600 meters above sea level, more than 5,000 feet up, and it was covered in neat, geometric fields. Gardens, laid out in careful patterns, separated by irrigation ditches and fences, with villages scattered among them. From the air, it looked like an organized, densely farmed landscape, the kind of thing you'd expect over the countryside of Europe, not over a supposedly empty corner of New Guinea that no outsider had ever entered. Archbold had stumbled onto a hidden world. That valley, the Balium Valley, held a population later estimated at well over 200,000 people, living in an agricultural society that the entire outside world had completely missed. They were called the Dani, and they farmed the valley floor with tools of stone, wood, and bone. No iron, no writing, no contact. They had been sealed off by the surrounding mountains for so long that, as far as they knew, they were the world. To actually reach them, Archbold's expedition landed the flying boat on a high mountain lake called Lake Habama, and teams pushed down into the valley on foot. It was the beginning of the end of the valley's isolation, though the Dani had no way of knowing that yet. A few years later, in 1945, a United States military plane would crash in these same mountains during the war, and the survivors, stunned by what they found, would nickname the place Shangri-La, after the hidden paradise from the novel. But the real place was no fantasy. It was a working civilization, thousands of years old. And to see how it actually functioned, you have to look at the ground itself. Here's the part that genuinely rewrites how you think about the word primitive. The New Guinea highlands are one of only a handful of places on the entire planet where human beings appear to have invented agriculture completely independently. No one taught them, no one brought it in. The evidence in these mountains points to farming going back something like 9,000 years, which puts this valley in the same conversation as the ancient Middle East as a birthplace of agriculture. These weren't people who had failed to progress. They were people who had solved the problem of feeding a huge population in a hard environment entirely on their own. The engine of the whole system is the sweet potato. In the Balium Valley, the sweet potato is everything. The Dani cultivate dozens upon dozens of named varieties, and it makes up the overwhelming majority of what everyone eats, along with taro, yams, bananas, sugarcane, ginger, and greens. Walk the valley floor and you're walking through a landscape that has been shaped by hand for millennia. Fields divided into tidy plots, ringed by deep drainage ditches that pull water off the soil and channel it away so the gardens don't drown in the highland rain. That ditch network is the thing that astonished Archbold from the air, and people had been digging and maintaining it with wooden tools for thousands of years before he ever flew over. And the labor is constant. Clearing, planting, weeding, harvesting, and endlessly maintaining those ditches. This is a full-time civilization's worth of work, done without a single metal blade. What it produces is a food surplus. And in the Balium Valley, that surplus doesn't just feed people, it feeds pigs. And pigs, as we're about to see, are where the real story of Dani life begins. To understand the Dani, you have to understand that a pig here is not just food. A pig is money, status, law, and family, all rolled into one animal. Wealth is counted in pigs. A man's standing in the community is measured, in large part, by how many pigs he controls. And pigs are so valuable that they're often cared for like members of the household. Piglets can even be nursed and raised right alongside the children, because losing one is a genuine financial blow. Pigs are the currency of every important moment in a person's life. When a man marries, his family pays a bride price, in pigs. When there's a dispute to settle, a debt to repay, an alliance to seal, or a death to compensate, the answer usually involves handing over pigs. Nothing significant happens in Dani society without them changing hands, and the ultimate expression of all this is the pig feast. On big ceremonial occasions, marriages, funerals, the end of a long conflict, the community holds a huge feast where pigs are killed, cooked, and shared out. The meat is cooked the traditional Highland way, in an earth oven, a pit lined with fire-heated stones, packed with pork, sweet potato and greens, sealed with leaves and left to steam for hours. Handing out that pork isn't just dinner. It's how a big man displays his wealth, repays his obligations, and binds the whole web of alliances together. The number of pigs slaughtered at a feast is a public statement about exactly how powerful and generous a man is. In a society with no money and no writing, the pig is the ledger everyone can see. Now here's a detail most people never even think about. In a valley high in the mountains, hundreds of kilometers from the sea, where does salt come from? Salt is essential. Your body can't function without it, and there's no ocean anywhere near. The Dani answer to that problem is one of the most quietly clever things in the whole valley, and it's traditionally the work of the women. Scattered in the highlands are natural brine pools, springs where the water rises up through the rock already salty. Dani women make the long walk to these pools carrying bundles of a spongy plant material, often the pith from banana stems. They soak that plant material in the brine until it's completely saturated with salty water, then carry the soaking bundles back and dry them out. Once dry, they burn the plant matter to ash. And that ash, concentrated, grey, and full of the salt that's soaked in at the pool, becomes their salt, packed and traded across the valley. Think about the sophistication hidden in that. With no chemistry, no equipment, nothing but plants and fire, they worked out how to extract salt from a mountain spring and carry it home in a form that keeps. It's exactly the kind of unglamorous, life-sustaining knowledge that lets a civilization survive in a place that, on paper, shouldn't be able to support 200,000 people. And that same daily rhythm, women at the salt pools, men in the gardens, was captured on film in the 1960s in a way that would make the Balium Valley famous around the world. Because the film crew hadn't come for the salt or the gardens, they'd come for the war. Before we get to the war, picture the village itself. The classic Dani home is the honai, a round hut with mud or wooden walls and a tall, domed roof thatched with grass, built low and snug to hold in heat, because up at this altitude the nights get genuinely cold. Traditionally, a compound is divided by use and by gender. Men sleep in one honai, women and young children in another, and there's a communal cooking hut and a long pen for the pigs. A fire burns low inside, the smoke drifting up through the thatch, and people sleep on a raised sleeping platform above the warmth. And then there's the clothing, or the near-total lack of it, that made the Dani world famous. Traditionally, Dani men wore almost nothing except the koteka, a long, narrow penis sheath made from a specially grown, hollowed-out and dried gourd. The gourds are cultivated deliberately, sometimes with small weights tied on to train them into long, curved or upright shapes as they grow. A man's koteka is held in place with thin loops of fibre, and beyond that, in the traditional Highland style, he might wear nothing at all. Women traditionally wore skirts of woven fibres or reeds, and everyone carried string bags called noken, slung from the forehead down the back, strong enough to carry firewood, sweet potatoes, or a baby. It sounds impossibly remote from modern life, and it is. But it's also a system perfectly tuned to its environment. Warm huts, hard-wearing tools, a diet that runs on the sweet potato, and a whole society organized around gardens and pigs. It worked, uninterrupted, for thousands of years. What it did not do was stay peaceful. In 1961, a Harvard expedition arrived in the Balium Valley to document something almost no outsider had ever properly recorded: a society that still practiced open, ritual warfare as a normal part of life. The team was remarkable. It included the filmmaker Robert Gardner, the anthropologist Carl Hyder, the writer and naturalist Peter Matthiessen, who would turn the experience into a classic book, and a young sound recordist named Michael Rockefeller, son of the future United States Vice President. The film they made, released in 1963, was called Dead Birds, and it is one of the most important ethnographic films ever shot. What they captured was startling. Among these Dani groups, war between rival alliances wasn't a rare catastrophe, it was a recurring ritual. Rival confederations would agree, in effect, to meet and fight. Lines of warriors, sometimes hundreds of men on each side, decorated with feathers and pig grease and carrying long spears and bows, would face off across a traditional battleground and clash in formal, almost choreographed battles that could happen roughly every couple of weeks. Casualties in any single fight were often light, but a single death would demand revenge, and revenge would demand revenge in return, and so the cycle turned, year after year. The title of the film comes from a Dani idea about death itself. In their telling, there was a kind of contest, long ago, between a bird and a snake over what would happen to human beings, whether people would shed their skins and live forever, like a snake, or die, like a bird. The bird won, and so men die. The Dani call the enemy dead, and the weapons and ornaments captured from them, dead birds. It's a hauntingly poetic frame for a brutal reality, and in the film, that reality lands hard, following the community through several deaths in a single season, including a young boy killed in a raid, and the grief that follows. As for Michael Rockefeller, his story is a chilling footnote to how remote this world really was. Later that same year, in November 1961, he disappeared off the swampy southern coast of West Papua, in the land of the Asmat people, after his boat overturned. His body was never found. To this day, no one knows for certain whether he drowned or met a darker end among people who, at the time, still took heads. West Papua, even then, was a place that could simply swallow an outsider whole. If war was how the Dani dealt out death, this is how they carried it. Dani mourning was one of the most physically intense expressions of grief anywhere in the world, and its most shocking form fell on the women. When a close relative died, a woman or a young girl in the family would sometimes have the upper section of one of her fingers amputated. The practice is often called ikipalin. The idea behind it was that grief and loss weren't only felt in the mind, they had to be shown, borne, and paid for in the body, and the physical pain of the loss was answered with physical pain. In some accounts, the fingertip was first bound tightly to numb it before it was removed. The wound was then cauterized. Do this across a lifetime of funerals, and a woman's hands became a record of everyone she had lost. An older woman might be missing the tops of several fingers, each one marking a death she had mourned. Grief was written across the rest of the body too. Mourners smeared themselves in mud, ash, and clay, sometimes for extended periods, so that sorrow was literally worn on the skin for everyone to see. It's a way of grieving that can be hard for outsiders to look at, but it comes from the same place all mourning does: the need to make an unbearable loss visible and shared. The practice has largely died out now, discouraged and effectively stopped as missionaries and the outside world moved in through the 20th century. But walk through a Dani village today, and you can still meet older women with the tops of their fingers missing, living memory of a way of grieving that goes back countless generations. And it points to something even more extraordinary about how these people refuse to let their dead simply vanish. Because in the Balium Valley, some of the dead never left at all. In a village called Wogi, near the town of Jiwika in the Balium Valley, there is a hut where a fire is never allowed to go out. And sitting in the smoke of that fire, in a crouched position, arms wrapped around drawn-up knees, is the blackened, leathery body of a man who died somewhere around 250 years ago. His name was Agat Mamete Mabel, and in life he was a chief and a warrior. In death, he became something the Dani have protected for 9 generations. He is a smoked mummy. When a great chief died, the Dani did not bury him. Instead, they preserved his body, treating it with smoke and animal fat and drying it slowly over a low fire, month after month, until it was cured and hardened against decay, the way you might smoke and preserve meat. The result was a mummy that could be kept above ground, in the village, for centuries. Agat Mamete Mabel is the most famous surviving example, but he is not the only one. A small handful of these ancestral mummies still exist in the valley, each cared for by the descendants of the man it once was. Today, Agat Mamete Mabel is looked after by a man named Eli Mabel, the current chief, who describes himself as the 9th generation to guard him. The mummy is kept in a traditional honai, and villagers keep a fire burning inside all year round to keep the body dry and stop it rotting. Eli Mabel has said he sometimes sleeps in the hut, alone, to protect his ancestor, and that keeping the mummy, maintaining the fire, and performing the ceremonies is a duty to protect their culture itself, because that culture is under real pressure. Agat Mamete Mabel was, in effect, the last man in his village to be given this kind of funeral. As Christianity spread through the valley in the 20th century, the old practice of mummifying chiefs stopped, replaced by ordinary burial. Which means these few blackened figures, crouched by their eternal fires, are the final generation of Dani mummies that will ever exist, the last physical link to a world that is quietly slipping away. And if you think that world sounds impossibly far from the modern one, you haven't yet seen how the people in the jungle to the south still live. Leave the high, cool valley of the Dani and drop down, south and west, into a completely different kind of hell and paradise. The vast, flat, swampy lowland rainforest of southern West Papua. Hot, dripping, tangled, cut through by muddy rivers and crawling with mosquitoes. And it's here, in one of the most isolated places left on Earth, that you find the people who inspired this whole video. The Korowai. The Korowai are astonishing for one simple reason. They were, essentially, unknown to the outside world until almost the 1970s. Western scientists first made real contact with them around 1974, and a Dutch missionary named Johannes Veldhuizen reached them in the late 1970s. That is not ancient history. That is within living memory, a people of a few thousand, living in the deep jungle, who had no idea the modern world existed while the rest of the planet was launching satellites and landing on the moon. And then there are the houses. The Korowai are famous for building their homes high up in the trees, genuine tree houses, lashed together from branches, bark, and palm, perched at the tops of tall trees above the forest floor. Many sit around 8 to 12 meters up, but some have been recorded much higher, well over 30 meters, up toward 100 feet in the air. To get up, you climb a single notched pole like a ladder, often with a baby or a pig or a bundle of firewood on your back. Traditionally, the height served real purposes. It lifted families above the biting insects and the floods, caught cooler air, and, crucially, gave protection and warning against enemies and raiders, because in this jungle, a house was also a fortress. Interestingly, researchers have suggested the very tallest tree houses may be built partly for show, including to impress visiting film crews, but the treehouse tradition itself is entirely real, and now the part everyone has heard about. The Korowai became internationally notorious as one of the last peoples on Earth said to have practiced cannibalism into surprisingly recent times. It was tied to a specific belief, the Kakwa. A Kakwa, in Korowai belief, is a kind of male witch or demon that secretly takes over a person and eats them from the inside, causing them to sicken and die. When someone died of a mysterious illness, the dying person might name whoever they believed was the Kakwa responsible. That accused person, treated not as a human but as the demon wearing a human face, could then be killed and, according to multiple reports, eaten as a way of destroying the evil and avenging the dead. It was not seen as eating a person, it was seen as eating a monster. How much of this still happens, or ever happened exactly as described, is genuinely debated. Journalists like Paul Raffaele documented Korowai, describing it as recently as the 2000s, but many scholars are skeptical, and some argue that whatever the Korowai once did, they now mostly keep the stories alive to intrigue and unnerve the outsiders who come looking for exactly that. What's not in doubt is the isolation. The Korowai are living proof that even in our century, there were people up in the trees of West Papua for whom the entire modern world was a rumor that hadn't arrived yet. So what happens when a world sealed off for thousands of years is suddenly opened? In the Balium Valley, the change came fast and hard. Dutch missionaries began arriving in the 1950s, and after Indonesia took control of West Papua in the 1960s, the pressure to modernize intensified enormously. Ritual warfare was suppressed, finger amputation was stopped, Christianity spread until the great majority of Dani identified as Christian, and the government went after the most visible symbol of the old life, the ketika itself. Around 1971 and 1972, Indonesian authorities launched what became known as Operation Ketika, an official campaign to get Highland Papuans to stop wearing their traditional penis gourds and put on Western shorts and shirts instead. It failed almost comically. The people handed out clothes had no soap, no spare sets, and no reason to want them. Some ended up wearing shorts as hats or using dresses as bags, and unwashed clothing just spread skin disease. The campaign was quietly abandoned. But the tide it was riding did not stop. Today, the koteka has faded from everyday life across the highlands, worn now mostly for festivals and for visitors. Because the modern world is here now. The valley's main town, Wamena, is a real town with an airport, though, tellingly, it still has no roads connecting it to the rest of Papua, so almost everything and everyone still arrives by plane, exactly as Archbold first did. Every year, the valley hosts the Balium Valley Festival, where Dani men stage mock battles in full traditional dress, feathers, spears, koteka and all, partly to keep the old culture alive, and partly for the tourists who now fly in to see it. The war has become a performance, the koteka has become a costume, and the mummy by the fire has become one of the last, flickering links to the world, as it was before the plane flew over. What stays with you about West Papua is how recent all of this is. We tend to imagine the Stone Age as something buried under thousands of years of history, and yet here was a farming civilization of 200,000 people, discovered by airplane in 1938, still fighting ritual wars in 1961, with women still marking their grief in their own fingers, and chiefs mummifying their dead. And in the jungle to the south, people were meeting the modern world for the very first time in the 1970s, from tree houses 100 feet up. These weren't primitive people who failed to advance. They were people who built a complete, functioning world. Gardens, wealth, law, faith and grief, entirely on their own, and kept it alive right up until the outside world flew in and changed everything. Most of that world is fading now, held together by a few elders, a few festivals, and a few blackened figures crouched beside fires that are never allowed to go out. So out of everything here, the mummies by the fire, the tree houses in the sky, the salt from the mountain pools, which part of this hidden world surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this one fascinating, check out my other videos on the most impossible to reach places on Earth, the islands and valleys you can only really visit through Google Earth. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.